You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here with me today on this Total Wellness Tuesday, where the topic is going to be on the low or high amine diet and what that could mean to your overall health. So this is one of those individualized food plans that you'll be starting to hear more and more about. And as you hear more about it, I want to make sure that you understand from both sides of the perspective what it means and if it's something that you really need to be concerned about. Because every diet that comes along or every point of view that comes along does not mean that you necessarily have to follow that or implement it in your life, but you should know about it. Remember, knowledge truly is power. Because when someone shares something with you or you hear something in the media or you see it on social media, you don't necessarily have to jump at it from whatever standpoint where you're violently against it or you're all for it. Sometimes there can be a middle ground that says, I'm all for that in these instances or for these people, and I'm against it for the same exact way, these instances and these people. And that is exactly what the amine diet is all about. So you're probably asking yourself right now, what are amines and should I be concerned with it? Well, if you or any of your loved ones, coworkers, friends, family, etc., have any of these issues, it will be very important that you do forward this to them or you learn it yourself and share it with them. So if you know anyone that gets chronic headaches or they get migraines, this is something to pay attention to. If you have anybody that you know that has cardiovascular issues, inflammation in the arteries, higher blood pressure, important to look at. Lower mood, depression, irritability, it's a big one as well. Or hives, skin itchiness, especially after eating, it's a big one to look at. Asthma or allergies in general, gut-based dysfunction, bloating, gut irritability, and also those people with autoimmune, including skin rashes. So autoimmune could be psoriatic arthritis. Other people are considering rosacea to be partially autoimmune. So again, I don't like the classifications, but if you're someone with, again, look at it, psoriasis or eczema or some type of skin-based issue. Here's why. Here's what amines are. Probably the most popular or more well-known amine that you'll hear about is histamine. So amines or amines are byproducts of protein. Now, before you think that it only is meat or fish, it actually is contained in every food. And I'm going to give you the list today. And then, of course, I'll give you a link to download it as well. So when we're looking at the breakdown of protein, we're really looking at, and not a lot of people talk about it from this perspective, but amines are made up of essentially nitrogen atoms. And you don't need to necessarily know this, except the effect it can have on the body. So when we look at amines, typically is anywhere from 1 to 3 nitrogen atoms, and they resemble ammonia. Ammonia can start to cause a lot of these symptoms that we have. It's almost like a backing up in the body, a poisoning of the blood. You feel it as the skin rash or the hives, the itchiness or the headache, but it's inflammation that moves around the body. Now, it can be totally systemic. Your whole body kind of feels run down, inflamed, irritable, and it's causing like skin itchiness or allergies, right? But it could also be more specific based on your pre-existing genetics. This is why genetics do matter, but there's always something that triggers those genetics to allow it to be expressed in the first place. For example, someone may have a predisposition to Hashimoto's or some type of migraine-based disorder. Well, amines are going to be able to be a precursor to that. I'm going to go through it specifically because there are some people that are going to be a little bit more predisposed. So those people in life, typically it's more of the Vata or ectomorph type, but it can be any type as well. Pittas are very prone to inflammation. But those people that are more sensitive to chemicals and the environment and pollen and seasonal things are going to be more typically sensitive to amines. Now, also, people that are on antidepressants or MAOIs, or they're on any type of proton pump inhibitor, PPI, or some type of acid reducer. Now, you might just use some over-the-counter Zantac or Tums or whatever it is that you might use, but all of those things are going to play into this, and I'll share with you why. So basically, the medications most closely associated, antidepressants, MAOI, and as well as the acid blockers. Okay, so let me go through it a little bit right now. What happens is when we eat certain foods, they begin to break down and they begin to essentially putrefy. And as they putrefy, some of those foods are going to be more prone to producing ammonia, higher levels of nitrogen from these amines in the body. Now, again, we know about histamine because we get the itchy eyes, we get the headaches sometimes, we get hives or allergies in general. But that does matter. It's a tip-off that you most likely have issues with amines. But it can also be higher blood pressure, and it can absolutely be headaches and digestive-based issues. In fact, most people with candida overgrowth or SIBO or maybe parasites and H. pylori, which might show up for you as one more level up as IBS, Crohn's, colitis, IBD. What am I leaving out? Every other acronym, right? That can go wrong with the gut. Well, any of those things can leave you more prone to not being able to process and break down these amines in the body. And the reason is this, that if your microflora, the bacteria that's inside of your gut, all 100 trillion cells, remember there's 40 trillion cells that make up you, and there's 100 trillion cells in your gut bacteria. There's actually more bacterial-based cells in your body than there are of you. Take a second to think about that. Well, those bacteria are living, hopefully, synergistically and harmoniously with you. Now, if that's the case and there's enough good bacteria to balance the what we call negative-based bacteria, then you will be able to produce more of the enzymes and have the bacteria that will naturally process and break down these amines, which is why I used to not be able to eat any higher amine-based food, that I will give you the list in just a second, at all. Or my eyes would literally swell up and they would get bright red and I would get hives, and I would typically get a headache as well. So one of the reasons why essentially every day after I ate lunch, a couple hours later, I would have a headache every single day in school. I didn't know the foods I was eating was giving me the headache. But more so than that, I didn't know that I had candida overgrowth, H. pylori, and bacterial overgrowth in my gut, because had I, then I would have been able to do what I finally did 10 years later, 15 years after being in high school, or 6th, 7th, 8th grade, where I was able to fix that. And so when I fixed it, then I could actually eat foods that I can do today that are higher in amines. I don't go overboard, but there's no food I can't eat. And I'm going to go over those again with you today. I feel the topic's important because it's not very well known. There's no chance that a conventionally trained doctor is going to know about amines. It's very, very small because there's no real nutrition training, and this is much deeper than regular nutrition. This is a real holistic or bioregulatory perspective. This goes deep, very deep levels to look at this. And I just want you to be aware of it because remember, it's really up to you to take control of your own health. No one else could possibly do this for you, but I also don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So maybe you're just learning this information today to pass it on to someone else, and that's valid as well. Not every Cabral concept that I do, not every topic that I do has to be for you, but it can be for a child. It can be for a niece or nephew or a loved one or a coworker where you see after they eat certain foods, they get a headache in the afternoon or higher blood pressure or they get hives or they get more irritable or just kind of wiped out and tired. Well, look at that because it can actually be a chemical sensitivity to the chemical in the food. Now, again, it's a natural chemical. It's called a biogenic or biogenic amine. It's like it is natural. It's produced naturally from these foods. But the problem is some people's bodies are more sensitive to them and they're going to react more. Those people that produce more mast cells, that have more inflammation, will react more to these food byproducts, and that's exactly what they are. So what will exacerbate this? Well, this is how it happens. A lot of people, and I've talked about this in my practice, they're doing prepped foods. They're doing leftover foods. And this affects so many people without them knowing about it. It gives them digestive issues. It gives them bloating. One is because the bacteria starts to grow on food essentially 6 hours after it started to cool down, after it's been cooked. They talked about that in Ayurveda. They called it essentially nutritionally dead after 6 hours. But also, when you think about it, it is easy to meal prep on a Sunday for your week. But the problem is then you have meat in your refrigerator, fish in your refrigerator, or other foods that are starting to essentially rot. That's really what they are. They're starting to break down. They're starting to ferment. They're growing bacteria. And that leads to higher levels of histamines or amines in general. Now, your body takes those in. It has to process all that bacteria and break that down. Hopefully, you have enough stomach acid. And you need to be able to break that all down in your gut as well. Well, that's a big one. Leftovers are a huge source of amines. Now, others are these. I want you after this show, if you felt like this was applicable, I did a show. It was episode 879. And it had to do with like the one food group that could be causing you a lot of inflammation. It was a game changer for me, an absolute game changer. When I removed high histamine foods, I felt so much better. Now, again, this is going back a while now. But what are high histamine foods? Again, these are also high amine foods. So I break it down like this for every private wellness client that we work with. I say this. If the food has been aged, if it's been smoked, or if it's been fermented, it most likely has a higher amount of amines. I gave you a checklist on that episode, 879. I created it myself after a lot of research. And I basically gave you foods high in histamines, foods that essentially will liberate more histamines in the body if they're already there. And then I gave you foods or beverages that will not allow you to break down the amines when they've already been consumed. Super important to look at that because even things like tea are on that list. So again, can you never drink tea? Of course you can, especially if you're not someone with this issue. However, you'll want to be careful if you have these issues. That's why there is no one for all diet. And anybody that tries to tell you that there is automatically wrong. They just don't know the levels that it takes. And I didn't know the levels that it took. I didn't. I was like, well, and because I could help people transform their body and pretty much get them well through a good elimination diet and like good macro and micronutrient planning. And for most people that will work. But if you're someone who's dealing with chronic-based issues, health or weight loss, there's something to look at. There really is. There are layers to this. You have to keep peeling back that layer. But I tell you, there's always a reason why. There is always a reason why. So again, if the food's been smoked, what are some examples of smoked food? Well, examples of smoked food are basically like a lot of processed meats have been smoked or processed. Those also fit the aged, right? If you're eating bacon or salami or anything like that, those are all processed meats. They have been aged. They have been cured. Anything cured, right? It's been aged. Smoked salmon. All of those things have smoke to them. And so that's going to trigger amines in the body, and it will trigger a cytokine or histamine-based response. Now, well, aged can also be aged cheese. Cheese is one of the highest amine-based products out there. Okay, so that's a big one for age, but also spices. A lot of people can't handle curries and other spices that are in there. Their body's just very sensitive to it. And then the last one is fermented. I mean, 5 years ago, I was told I was crazy for not recommending kombucha to every single person in my practice. Like, why are you not recommending kombucha? There's all this great bacteria. There's this, this, and this. And I said, well, it's not great for everyone. They're like, what do you mean it's not great for everyone? Well, I said, if you have yeast overgrowth in the gut, if you have stomach acid issues, if you have histamine issues, it's not good for those people. And they're like, no, that's not true. And it's like, you can't just because you don't understand an issue, you can't just dismiss it. But that's what our culture does. So now when someone says something to me and I don't understand it, because I don't understand everything in the world, it's not how it works, right? We're not all out there. So when someone says something to me, I go, that's interesting. I don't know if it's true, and I don't know if it's not true. But let me ask more about it. Let me see this person's level of knowledge behind it. Or did they simply read it on an Instagram post? Because that does happen. I want to know more. I keep myself open to it. And then I say, oh, you know what? They're right. That is true, but only in these cases. And that's what we're talking about today. But this can be an absolute life changer for a lot of people. Okay, so we have fermented foods. What else would be fermented? Not just the kombucha, but what about alcohol? Especially red wine. You want to meet the processing, the aging, the fermenting, the yeast. That's red wine. That's why it affects so many people in terms of flushing and in terms of hives and headaches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It can be a really tough one. It really can. So it's also one of the ones when people in my private practice like, what can I drink for alcohol? Like I want to be able to have something every once in a while. And I let them know, listen, one of the things that typically isn't as bad is a tequila that has been not aged, but that was actually made in a metal or like stainless steel barrel. I have no plug for this company, but something like a Patron Silver. And I know that it's probably a little bit more expensive, but it's not aged. It's not aged in the same way, and it's not in those oaky barrels. And so it doesn't even have that yellowish color. It's a clearer color, I believe. So when you look at it, you can say, okay, well, there are, again, levels to this, red wine probably being one of the worst. And so, when you can look at it, you can say this is another example of the rain barrel effect. It really is. Because most people can tolerate amines just fine. Like totally fine. But if they were to have a meal that combined, let's say like an aged, dried rub steak, right? So it's an aged steak with a dry rub on it. And then they would have red wine with it. That might just put them right over the edge. But, if they had a salad out with their friends and just, fresh local food and a glass of white wine or so with it, they'd probably have no issues, right? So again, it's all about what is your threshold. And people have different thresholds for amines. They have different thresholds for oxalates. They have different thresholds for this, that, and the other thing. That's why people say, I can't have any oxalates. Well, that's really difficult to completely eliminate. But you also don't need to. You eliminate the high ones, and then for the most part, you don't let the others build up. It's like inflammatory foods. Everyone's going to eat probably a little bit of inflammatory foods or a little bit of acidic foods, right? But what happens is we just balance it over the course of a day, and that keeps us healthy. Now, in the beginning, though, you really want to empty that rain barrel. You really want to go deep and go low on high amine foods. So that's what I'm going to give you right now. Hopefully this has been helpful so far. It's a very complicated topic, but of course, you can read more about it. If this interests you, the Cabral concept can be that kind of starting point, and you can absolutely learn more about it. Okay, let's get right into that food list, and then I'm going to give you a couple things to do to desensitize yourself to amines at the end. So here's what we want to do is that we want to make sure that we are really reducing our high amine foods to 1 cup or less per day. So remember, we're basically saying that you can have some, keep it low in the diet. However, if you're suffering from the migraines, the mood, the hives, the skin rash, the high blood pressure, the gut issues, we go low to almost none, right? We go very low in this. And this is a very nice list. I'm going to give the person credit that I saw it on. And the list that was created is by Dr. Richard Coleman out of, it looks like Australia. I'm going to link up this nice PDF that he created. It was done through the Agribusiness School, and it actually looks like it's in conjunction with New Zealand. So a little shout out here to New Zealand. So here's the thing. I'm going to link this up, but I'm going to go through it with you right now. So when we're looking at nuts and seeds, the highest of the high, the ones we need to stay away from are black walnuts. And we also have to stay away from like spiced snacks, like any spiced nuts. Stay away from those. Okay, other high ones, coconut, peanuts, and pecans. Moderate ones, Brazil nuts, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds. That means just mild, right? Low are going to be almonds, cashews, mac nuts or macadamia nuts, pine nuts, and pistachios. And then negligible will be, these are just taco shells, things like that you don't need to know about. Okay, more like corn. So let's move on to fruit. There's not really a massively high fruit like there is for black walnuts or dry aged rubs or spices on nuts. You'll find out in a second that things like vinegar and sauerkraut and spinach are very high, right? Spinach comes up a couple times. High in oxalates, high in amines. That's why, some people, even though, I say, greens are great sometimes in your smoothies, you may not do that for you. I mean, that's the truth. And there is no all for one, right? You experiment, you see what works for you. But high fruit, not very high, but high fruit are going to be avocado, banana, fig, grapes, lemons, mandarin, pineapple, plum, and raspberries. And let me add a little bit of a level to this. When you look at avocados and bananas, and also figs, they only actually start to get higher in amines the riper they are. So if you had a brown banana, a lot of people like the ones with the brown spots on them because they actually have higher levels of what's called TNF-alpha, I believe, or tumor necrosis factor. Sorry, TNF. And they are great. I mean, they're fantastic. It's been proven, again, by science, by nutritional science. But, again, they're going to be a little higher in amines. I actually let mine get to that point where they have the brown spots, and then I freeze them for smoothies. But, again, I'm not dealing with these histamine issues anymore. Before, I could never eat bananas, especially ripe bananas, and I couldn't even do avocado. So that's that. Moderate would be dates, kiwi, lime, orange, passion fruit, pawpaw. If you don't know what pawpaw is, check it out, P-A-W, and tangerine. Now, again, the riper the fruit gets, the more amines, meaning because it's what? What is a fruit doing as it ages and ripens? It's fermenting. That's why. Okay. Black currants is low, grapefruit, honeydew, red currant, and rock melon all low. Very small amounts, if any. Apples, apricots, gooseberries, peach, pear, rhubarb, but remember, rhubarb's high in oxalates, strawberry, and cherries. A lot of my favorites in there. We've got cherries, we've got apples, we've got pears. So all great right there, right? People always say, because if you just look up the high amine foods, you'll just say to yourself, I can't eat anything. And, you know, it looks like it. I was there. Remember, 19 years old. I was given a food sensitivity test. Everything was high. And my doctor didn't really know at the time. This is still a natural health practitioner, but they're like, oh, I got to eliminate all these foods. And I basically couldn't eat anything. They didn't realize that it was all about sealing up that gut wall. I'm going to get to that in a moment. All right, very high for veggies. Sauerkraut, which would be like cabbage, but it's fermented cabbage or anything fermented. And spinach. High would be eggplants, mushrooms, tomatoes. Tomatoes, especially as they're being processed or canned. Because again, what are they doing? They're being stored. They're being aged. Broccoli, cauliflower, dill pickles, and olives are all moderate. No real low, but negligible veggies are going to be asparagus, cabbage, capsicum, so more like pepper, carrots, celery, corn, cucumbers, beans, green peas, lettuce, lima beans, onion, potatoes, soybeans, turnips, and zucchini. So there you have it on your veggies. Now we're looking at meat, chicken, fish, and eggs. All right, very high. Anchovies, liver, brains, kidney, tripe. We're looking at a lot of the organs. Canned tuna, because it's been aged. Dried, smoked, or pickled fish. Fish roe, meat pie, pate, salami, sausages, bacon, smoked meat, or chicken. High would be aged meats. Bacon can fall in there as well, because, again, some things are going to affect you a little bit more than others. Like when I had issues having to eliminate oxalates and histamines, some high histamine foods, honestly, didn't affect me that much, but others put me way over the edge. I could always do spinach, but I could never do a lot of these like fermented foods. They just didn't work with my body, right? Even though I was going through the GAPS program, they would tell me to eat all of this, and it didn't work. But it doesn't mean that the GAPS program is bad. It just means that you can't do everything for everyone, right? I became a GAPS practitioner many years ago, I think somewhere around 2010, and it's still a great program. We've got high is aged meats, bacon, canned sardines, frozen fish, gravy, ham, and pork. Anything that kind of grills these or makes those charcoal marks will increase the amine levels. Canned salmon, chicken liver, chicken skin, so the skin of the animal as well. Meat, fish, any food older than 2 days. Frozen meats, like a prepared food, will also, if it's already been cooked and frozen, that will increase it. And then low will be eggs, beef, chicken with no skin, white fish, lamb, rabbit, turkey with no skin, and veal. Okay, and there's no negligible ones for fish and meat, and it should be fresh. Okay, essentially vinegars and soy sauces and a lot of condiments are going to be high in amines. Herbs, peppers, and spices, some will be okay, but others like cinnamon will be a little bit higher in amines, okay? Curries as well. Beverages, well, anything flavored, you add a flavor to it, or it's like Coca-Cola, or if it's like a chocolate milk, all of those are going to be higher, especially since dairy is super high. Any type of alcohol, beer, red wine, fruit wines, ports, sherry, white wines are all high as well. Sake, stout, champagne, and ales, moderate. Nothing is low. And then the negligible is going to be carob-based powder, coffee, gin, lemonade, goat-based milk for the most part, soy, certain teas, vodka. The teas would be more of an herbal tea, not necessarily green or black. Some vodkas, if they are made more from a rice, and whiskey as well. So some whiskeys actually are up there, and I'll give that every once in a while. I'll give like a single whiskey as well as that non-aged tequila will be fine as well. I just don't know too many people that drink gin, but that could certainly be on your scope as well. Tito's vodka, which is a gluten-free vodka, can work for others too. But I'm probably not going to be the right person to give you alcohol recommendations. All right. For sweets, well, dark chocolate is very high in amines. So that's one of those ones that can give you headaches, sometimes even the next day after consuming it at night. Cocoa is on the high list, not the very high. Milk chocolate, high. And white chocolate, high. Nothing moderate, nothing really low. And then the negligible will be more like caramels, carob, maple syrup, and sugars. Those will all be on the lower. And then in terms of dairy, essentially all dairy, like all cow's milk dairy for the most part. A fresh cheese will just be more high in amines, or if you get a fresh cottage cheese or fresh ricotta, not aged, not stored, those can be actually lower. Okay, so that's important to look at that. Tofu can be lower, and it says here Gruyere. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Gouda can be a little lower as well if you're into those. So that is your food list. I'm going to link it up there for you. Remember, there's still plenty of foods to eat, and this is not going to be at their lifetime, because here's why. All the people that I've worked with, they might always have a predisposed sensitivity to these things, kind of like I do, but you can go and you can eat any one of these foods for the most part when you rebalance your immune system and you heal your gut. If you have not run an organic acids test, run an organic acids test. If you only run one lab, if you have digestive issues, run that. We offer them to 19 countries around the world at equilibriumnutrition.com. You could run a food test along with it. You could run a stool test along with that as well. So if you're not going to run a lab test, complete the CBO protocol. You can find that at equilibriumnutrition.com. Do the CBO finisher, which heals and seals the gut wall. And other products that will help you with amines to decrease a lot of the symptoms you're feeling right now will be something like alkalizing vitamin C. Products like our Hist Pro. What does Hist Pro stand for? Well, it's reducing histamines, and it works so well. It has quercetin in there, right? Bromelain. Things like pycnogenol or pine bark will work. I already talked about the vitamin C. Taking an activated B complex, like one activated B complex at lunch, in addition to your daily nutritional support shake, which is low in all of these things like oxalates and amines. You can do that, but B6 is such a big one. I always talk about the unsung hero of the B vitamin family, which is B6. Other great products, magnesium, right? It's like 9 out of 10 people need magnesium. It's why I talk about the top 15 products recommended by functional medicine doctors all over the world and healthcare practitioners. Magnesium is one of those products. Check out that podcast if you didn't hear that one. Super, super important. Omega-3 fish oils helps with the anti-inflammatories. The EPA helps with that. That's why we made our omega-3 support higher at EPA, because it helps as that anti-inflammatory. And then, of course, as you're rebuilding your gut, you're going to use good quality dairy-free probiotics like we use with the daily probiotic support, or even the Lactobacillus acidophilus. That is the way to do it. It really is. Remember, there's always a reason why you feel the way that you do, and there's always a reason how you can, or a way that you can actually correct these underlying imbalances. I invite you to check out now episode 879 on histamines, and I also, after that, check out our podcast on rotation diets, on how to rotate these foods to keep a journal and actually see which ones are affecting you the most. That is podcast number 754. Thanks so much for tuning in. I could talk about this honestly for hours, but I'm at my limit. I'm at my max. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Take care, everyone. And as always, if this show is helpful, please do feel free to pass it along to anyone else you believe it could serve. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp hearts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.